86% of the world's billionaires built their empires on money that wasn't theirs. They didn't save their way to the top, they borrowed their way there. I'm Alex. This is Wealthonomics, where we expose the financial system the wealthy don't want you to understand. Last week we exposed how banks profit from your savings. Today it gets worse. Most people are terrified of debt because they've been trained to view it as a weight around their neck. But in the upper echelons of finance, debt isn't a bill, it's fuel. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how the 1% use leverage to bypass taxes and accelerate wealth at a speed that makes your high-yield savings account look like a rounding error. To understand why debt is the ultimate weapon, we have to look at the design of the system itself. In 1971, when the world moved off the gold standard, money effectively became debt. Every dollar in your wallet is essentially a ledger entry created when someone, somewhere, took out a loan. This wasn't an accident. It was a structural shift by the Federal Reserve and global central banks to ensure the velocity of capital remained high. In a debt-based monetary system, the people who hold the debt, the right kind of debt, are the ones who actually own the equity of the future. The system is literally built to reward borrowers and punish savers. Think about the traditional debt-free dream sold to the middle class. You're told to pay off your mortgage, avoid credit cards, and live within your means. While that's great advice for avoiding consumer traps, it's a death sentence for wealth creation. Institutional investors like Blackstone or Vanguard don't buy assets with cash. They use leverage. They understand that if they can borrow at 4% and invest at 8%, they aren't just making 4%. They are infinitely scaling their return on equity. This is called positive arbitrage, and it is the foundational mechanism of every major hedge fund and private equity firm on Wall Street. But here's what your financial advisor will never tell you. Debt is the only way to get liquidity without triggering a taxable event. When a tech founder or a real estate mogul needs $10 million, they don't sell their shares or their buildings. Selling triggers capital gains tax, often upwards of 20 to 30%. Instead, they go to a private bank and take out a line of credit against those assets. The bank gives them the cash at a low interest rate, and because a loan isn't income, the IRS gets exactly zero. They are spending the bank's money to fund their lifestyle, while their own assets continue to grow compounded. This buy, borrow, die strategy is the primary reason the wealth gap is widening. The part they deliberately don't teach in school is that debt is essentially a short position on the currency itself. When you take out a fixed-rate loan, you are betting that the dollar will be worth less in the future than it is today. In an inflationary environment, the real value of your debt shrinks every single year. The bank is essentially paying you to hold their capital. If inflation is 5% and your loan is 4%, your real interest rate is negative. You are literally being subsidized by the system to stay leveraged. Here's the thing that keeps middle-class families trapped generation after generation. They only understand consumer debt. This is the high-interest, soul-crushing debt used to buy things that lose value: cars, clothes, vacations. The wealthy, however, only touch productive debt. This is debt used to acquire assets that produce more cash than the debt costs to service. If your asset generates $2,000 a month and the loan costs $100, that $500 spread is free money created out of thin air using the bank's own balance sheet. You aren't working for money, you're managing the spread between interest rates. We see this played out at the highest corporate levels. Companies like Apple and Microsoft have hundreds of billions in cash sitting in offshore accounts, yet they still issue billions of dollars in corporate bonds. Why would a company with that much cash borrow more? Because the interest they pay on that debt is tax-deductible, and the cost of borrowing is often lower than the return they get by keeping their own cash invested. They are using debt as a strategic shield to protect their capital and maximize their shareholder value. It's a sophisticated shell game where the only loser is the taxpayer who doesn't understand the rules. Everything I just told you is accurate, but there's a dimension to this story that almost no financial content creator covers: the debt capture. The government doesn't just allow this system, they require it. The global economy is a giant Ponzi scheme of credit that needs constant new debt to stay liquid. If everyone paid off their debts tomorrow, the money supply would collapse and we'd enter a Great Depression. The system needs you to be in debt, but it prefers you to be in the bad kind, the kind that makes you a compliant worker bee, not the good kind that makes you a free agent. This brings us to the concept of other people's money, or OPM. If you want to buy $1 million apartment complex, you don't need $1 million. You need $100,000 for a down payment and a bank to provide the other $900,000. Now, if that property goes up in value by just 10%, you haven't made 10% on your money. You've made 100%. Your $100,000 turned into $200,000 because you used the bank's leverage to capture the appreciation on the full million. This is the force multiplier effect that creates generational wealth in a single decade. But there's a trap here that catches the unwary. Most people fail because they don't understand the difference between risk and volatility. Leverage increases both. When the market turns, debt becomes a magnifying glass for your losses. This is why the middle class is taught to fear it, because they don't have the margin of safety required to weather the storm. The ultra-wealthy use debt because they have the cash flow to service it even when the market dips. They don't use debt to gamble. They use it to secure positions they know they can hold for 20 years. Consider the carry trade. This is when sophisticated investors borrow money in a currency with low interest rates, like the Japanese yen, and invest it in assets with higher yields elsewhere. They are essentially harvesting the interest rate differential of the entire world. They aren't smarter than you, they just have access to cheaper capital and the guts to use it. The system is a giant plumbing network of interest rates, and the people who know how to turn the valves are the ones who get to drink, while everyone else dies of thirst. So why are you still saving pennies in a jar? Every day you wait to utilize leverage is a day you're losing to the velocity of capture. The wealth is being moved from those who hold cash to those who hold assets backed by debt. If you aren't using debt to buy your freedom, the system is using debt to buy your labor. It's a binary choice. You are either the person paying the interest, or you are the person using the interest to buy the world. There is no middle ground in a debt-based empire. You need to start by shifting your mindset from debt-free to debt-efficient. This means auditing your liabilities. If you have high-interest consumer debt, kill it immediately. That's the bank leveraging you. But if you have the opportunity to acquire a cash-flowing asset using low-interest fixed-rate debt, that's your ticket out. Start small. Use a small amount of margin or a low-interest business loan to acquire an asset that pays for itself. The goal isn't to own nothing. The goal is to own everything and owe the bank as little as possible relative to your assets. The stakes couldn't be higher. We are entering an era of unprecedented monetary expansion. The trillions of dollars being printed will dilute your savings, but they will inflate the value of assets held by the leveraged. If you stay on the sidelines out of fear, you aren't being safe, you're being liquidated. The most dangerous thing you can do in a burning building is sit still. Debt is the ladder out of the fire, provided you have the strength to climb it. It's time to stop being the collateral and start being the creditor. 3 things to take from today. First, debt is the primary mechanism of money creation in the modern world. Second, good debt is any loan that costs less than the return on the asset it buys. Third, the wealthy use debt to gain liquidity without ever triggering a tax bill. Remember that 86% stat from the beginning? Here's what that actually means. The ladder to the top isn't made of gold. It's made of credit. Next on Wealthonomics, how to pay zero tax legally like the ultra-wealthy. If this changed how you see the system, subscribe. The next one goes deeper.